So we worked on this start game screen. We worked on this game screen, and of course, as mentioned before, you can definitely fine-tune this to your likings. Now I want to work on this game over screen because, of course, this screen is not that pretty right now. Now, for this, let's switch to the game over screen. What do we want to do on this screen? Well, I think it makes sense to show a game over title, maybe a nice image, and then below that image also a short summary of the game. How many turns it took the computer, the phone, to guess our number and what our number actually was. I think that could make a lot of sense. And for this, to achieve this, I will start by replacing this text here in the game over screen with a view, with a general container, which we of course have to import. Because as you learned by now, that is very often the first thing you do, since the view is this generic container component that contains all your other elements that make up a screen or a more complex component. Now in here, I then want to have my title, and I will reuse this existing title component, which I import from components UI title. But of course, you could also build a different title specifically for this page if you wanted to. I will reuse this existing title and say game over. And then below this title, I'd like to have an image. An image which I then also want to style. For this, we can use this image component, which we need to import from React Native, as you learned. And then for the image, I prepared the image for you. Now we already got the assets images folder, and therefore you should simply download and drag and drop that image into this images folder. It's this success PNG file. So now that's the image which I'd like to display here. And for this, we can add a source here, as we always did, and require this from the assets folder like this. And then there from images, it's success.png. That's the image I want to add. Now on this image, I then want to add some styling, but for the moment, let's just save this and take a look at that. So now we get the title and we get the image, and the image is way too big, as you can tell. And it's way too big on purpose because, as mentioned, I want to show you how you can resize and style the image. And for example, I also want to create a round image, so a circle, and we can achieve this with style properties, which we'll dive into next. So for that, I will import style sheet into this game over screen component and create the styles object as we did it many times before. Style sheet create, and then create a style for our image. And now when it comes to creating an image with rounded corners, what works best is that you create a view around your image, and then on that view you add rounded corners and you add overflow hidden, as we also did it earlier for our custom button. If you remember this, there we also worked with this kind of approach, having a container with border radius and overflow hidden. We'll do something similar for this image now. And therefore here I'll add the image container style, where I add a border radius of, let's say, 200, and a width of 400 and a height of 400. And the border radius should be half your width or height, and width and height should be the same amount, so that we create a square. And then by setting border radius to half our width or height, we actually create a circle. That is how we can create such a circle image. And I will also add a border width of 3 here to add a little border around that image. And the border color then can be any color you want. I will use my colors constant, which is therefore imported from constants colors. And on this colors constant, I want to choose a dark shade of my primary color, like primary 800, which goes into the black color, but isn't black, but still has some plum color elements to it. Now, very important, as mentioned, we also want to add overflow hidden to make sure that we hide the square or the rectangular nature of the actual image. And we use this container as an overlay, as a mask for this image, you could say. And I will also add a vertical margin, or actually a margin in all directions here on that image. And here, let's say we want to add a margin of, let's say 36 pixels, and we can of course tweak this later. Now this style will be applied to this view, which is the container for this image. So hence I add it like this. The image itself will now also receive some styling, and for this I'll create an image style property, and all I do here is set the width to 100% and the height to 100%. And that 100% will refer to the container, to the view in which the image is placed. That's how percentage values always work in React Native. They refer to the container of the element on which you set up those percentage values. So in this case, I will add this style, this styles.image style, to the image, and therefore the percentage width and height on that image will refer to the width and height of the view that holds the image, and that of course will be 400 each. With that applied, if we save this, now we got this circular image here. Now it's a little bit too big, and in the next course section, we're going to learn how we can adapt this dynamically to the available device size. For the moment, I'll fine-tune it manually and decrease this to 300 pixels height and width, and hence the border radius to 150, so that it's still half the width. With this looks better, I'd say. Now, in addition, I also want to have some general distance to the top and some padding around the title and so on. And therefore, it makes sense to wrap this overall thing here into a view, which we already did, which receives some styling as well. And for this, I'm going to add my good old screen or root container styling property, my styling object to be precise, and add flex1 so that we take all the available space. Then I'll add some padding, let's say 24 pixels. And I want to center the entire content in the middle, both horizontally and vertically. And this can be achieved by using justify content center and align items center. This will center it on both axes, and therefore it will be centered horizontally and vertically. And now this root container style just needs to be applied to this view, which wraps this entire content like this. With that, we got this look, and this doesn't look too bad, I'd say. Now, this is not everything I want to do though. Instead, as I said, below the image, I want to output a short summary of the game. And for this, we can go back to the JSX code. And then below this image container, we can add another view simply to group together some text elements, though we might actually not need that. So let's just start with a text right away, now that I think about this. And for this, of course, text should be imported here from React Native. And then in this text, I want to say your phone needed X rounds to guess the number Y. And of course, X and Y are placeholders for the actual values. Now we'll derive the values in a second, but what I want to do is I want to highlight X and Y. And React Native makes that very easy as well.